She had done everything right, saved every month, kept her pension contributions, watched the balance grow. Her retirement fund held Petrobras stock. Then one morning she checked her account. In 18 days, she had lost 40% of everything she had saved. She wasn't robbed at gunpoint. No one broke into her bank. No virus wiped her account. A group of men in suits, men she had never heard of, in boardrooms she had never seen, had been stealing from her company for 10 years. And when the world found out, the market did the rest. $577 billion gone in 18 days, not from one account, from millions of accounts, from pension funds, retirement savings, and the financial futures of ordinary Brazilians who had trusted their government with their money. Her name was Maria. She was 3 years from retirement. She went back to work. This is not a story about oil. This is a story about what happens when an entire government decides that stealing is just the cost of doing business. Petrobras was supposed to be Brazil's crown jewel. Founded in 1953, it was the engine of the Brazilian economy, a state-owned oil giant that discovered one of the largest deepwater oil reserves on Earth. The pre-salt fields off the Brazilian coast held an estimated 50 billion barrels of oil. The company was worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Every Brazilian citizen owned a piece of it. Every Brazilian pension fund held its stock. When Petrobras won, Brazil won, and a small group of men decided that was an opportunity. His name was Paulo Roberto Costa, director of supply at Petrobras, a bureaucrat in a suit, unremarkable, forgettable, except Paulo had figured something out. Petrobras was spending billions every year on construction contracts, refineries, pipelines, platforms, massive, complex projects with massive, complex budgets, the kind of budgets where an extra 1% here and 2% there is impossible to track. So Paulo built a system. He approached Brazil's biggest construction companies, the ones who wanted Petrobras contracts, and made them an offer. You inflate your bids by 1 to 3% above the real cost. You win the contract. You pay the difference in cash to me and my colleagues. Everyone gets rich. Petrobras pays. And Petrobras belongs to the Brazilian people. So technically, the Brazilian people pay. They called it the club. 39 companies, all competing for contracts, all paying the same tax to the same people. For 10 years, it ran like clockwork. But Paulo Costa couldn't move that kind of money alone. He needed someone to make it disappear. That someone was Alberto Youssef. Youssef was a black market money dealer, a dolero, who had spent 20 years building an underground financial network, shell companies, offshore accounts, cars, watches, real estate. He could take a briefcase of dirty cash and turn it into a clean wire transfer to a Swiss bank account in 48 hours. Between them, Costa and Youssef moved hundreds of millions of dollars. And the money didn't stop at Petrobras executives. It went to politicians, to party treasurers, to campaign funds, to the Workers' Party, the party of President Lula, which had been in power since 2003, and to the party of his successor, Dilma Rousseff, who had been chairwoman of the Petrobras board during the years the scheme was running. Everyone was eating. It unraveled in a gas station parking lot. March 2014. Federal police in Curitiba arrested Alberto Youssef on an unrelated money laundering charge. Routine case. Except when they searched his records, they found something that wasn't routine at all. A Land Rover, registered to Paulo Roberto Costa, paid for by Youssef. They pulled the thread. Within months, Costa was under arrest and talking. Then Youssef was talking. Then the construction companies were talking. Then the politicians. The investigation was called Operação Lava Jato, Operation Car Wash, named after the gas station car wash that Youssef had used as one of his money laundering fronts. What started as a small financial crime case became the largest anti-corruption investigation in the history of Latin America. By 2016, the numbers were staggering. Over 200 people charged, over 100 convicted, executives from every major Brazilian construction firm in prison, the heads of the Senate and the Chamber of Deputies arrested, the former treasurer of the Workers' Party sentenced to over 40 years, and then, the biggest name of all, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Lula, the most popular president in Brazilian history, a man who had lifted 30 million people out of poverty, the hero of the Brazilian left, convicted of corruption and money laundering in 2017, sentenced to 9 years in prison. The charges: accepting a beachside apartment as a bribe from one of the construction companies in the club. He claimed innocence. He still does. But the judge who convicted him had become the most famous man in Brazil. His name was Sergio Moro, a 44-year-old federal judge from Curitiba who had spent years quietly studying Italian anti-mafia investigations, who believed, against all evidence, that powerful people in Brazil could actually go to prison. For 3 years, he was right. Then it got complicated. The construction companies that confessed and cooperated, they collapsed. Odebrecht, the largest construction company in Latin American history, filed for bankruptcy. 500,000 jobs gone overnight. Not criminals who lost their jobs. Workers, drivers, engineers, electricians, people like Maria. The Brazilian economy went into freefall. GDP collapsed. Unemployment doubled. And then Sergio Moro, the crusading judge who had put presidents in prison, accepted a job as Minister of Justice under the new right-wing president, Jair Bolsonaro. The man who convicted Lula became a cabinet member of Lula's political enemy. The Supreme Court later ruled that Moro had been biased, that he had coordinated with prosecutors in ways that violated Lula's rights. Lula was freed, his convictions annulled. In 2022, he ran for president again. He won. Here is what the Petrobras scandal actually tells us. It is not a story about a corrupt country. Brazil is not uniquely corrupt. The companies that paid bribes to Petrobras also paid bribes in Angola, Peru, Ecuador, Panama, the Dominican Republic, Venezuela, and the United States. Odebrecht admitted to paying $788 million in bribes across 12 countries. The U.S. Department of Justice called it the largest foreign bribery case in history. The system that stole Maria's retirement was the same system operating everywhere else. The same inflated contracts, the same shell companies, the same offshore accounts. The only difference was one prosecutor in one city who decided to follow the money. And when he did, the whole world shook. $577 billion, 18 days, one parking lot arrest. That is how fragile the whole thing is. Maria das Graças went back to work. She is still working. The men who stole from her are mostly free. And somewhere right now, in a boardroom you will never see, someone is building another club. The question is never whether it's happening. The question is whether anyone is looking.